this idea that we've been talking about today about taking the stress off of ourselves, because it is not about being perfect. That's not what our kids need.
If she was a working woman before, now she's stay at home. It feels like it would make any loss of identity that's like kind of normal after childbirth like so much more dramatic.
A lot of us sometimes still misunderstand our partner or like feel like misattuned, and the repair is everything and not just getting it right the first time. I think it really helps us lean into our kindness.
What does being a better parent mean to you? Dr. Kavita Pallod Sekhsaria is a licensed clinical psychologist providing telehealth services to adults in Maryland, DC, and Virginia. She offers individual and couples therapy as well as community consultation services to help address concerns such as anxiety, depression, stress, identity exploration, self-worth, multicultural issues, relationship challenges, and spirituality. You can check out her site at www.kpspsychotherapy.com. And even reach out if you'd like to schedule an initial consultation to see if you two might be a good fit. One of the reasons I'm excited to have Kavita or Dr. Sekhsaria or Dr. Sexy here is because she, we grew up together in the South Asian community here in Houston. And now you are a relationship and couples therapist, and you've gone to school for what feels like forever to be able to do this well, and you have that cultural context, but you're also an eldest daughter.
I am.
So that's a whole world I want to get into. And you also spent 2 years as a educator, a teacher in elementary school. So I feel like that adds like an interesting perspective, especially to parenting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think while education was not for me, in a lot of ways it was a failed career path, if, I'm being really honest. Everything happens for a reason, and I'm definitely a better mom for having been through that experience, and I'm a better therapist for sure too.
All right, cool. Well, I'm excited to learn like everything I can from you. I'm really wanting, because you have that couples in relationship counseling like expertise, I'm really wanting to help people explore the path to becoming a parent, and especially that really difficult newborn phase. So why don't we start with pregnancy?
Yeah.
What do you see? Like, what does a relationship that is strong enough to think about having a baby look like?
Yeah, it's all the things that make relationships strong in general, right? It almost sounds cliche at this point, but are you able to communicate? Are you able to fight fair, right? And get through the inevitable conflict that any couple needs to be able to get through? Because, yeah, I think the thing about parenting is that you'll just find yourself caring so much about stuff that you never thought you would. And there's going to be times when you're just not aligned with your partner about those things based on how you were raised, based on any insecurity, or just because you're different in how you think about certain things. So yeah, are you communicating well? Are you in a place to be able to accept huge changes, right? And also accept huge changes to your partner and to your dynamic with each other. Still today, right? Most of the people having babies tend to be in heterosexual, cisgendered relationships, which means that, dad and mom are going to have a hugely, hugely different experience of pregnancy and honestly of parenting too. Yeah, and being able to like be really aware of that is important, as is knowing that you can't possibly be able to talk about everything that you want to align on and have every conversation that helps you feel prepared, because things will literally change. Like for so many people, it feels really transformative to hold your child in your arms the first time.
Right.
And that moment is also, sometimes overemphasized, but everything about parenting can be hard to predict. And so I think more than anything, you have to be in a place to really lean into changes, to lean into experiencing parenting and pregnancy differently, and being okay with that, right? And being able to lean into the different ways of supporting your partner.
Totally. You said something about fighting fair that I wanted to tease apart a little bit. How do you know if you're fighting fair?
Yeah, I think we all have a tendency, right, to want to see ourselves well, to represent our point of view really well. And it can make us like focus on really small examples in order to prove our point. And that's natural. But if we're like constantly in a place where we're trying to get a point on our partner rather than actually understanding what the root of the conflict is and what we both need, then we have a problem, right? And so fighting fair means like knowing that you and your partner are actually on the same team and the opposing team is the conflict, right? Whether it's like, how do we want to do bedtime, or how are we going to handle our in-laws, both sets of in-laws perhaps living with us for a month after the baby's here, or you know, the umpteen other things that feel like they really draw out fears, insecurities, whatever they might be, to remember that like even the insecurity isn't like the problem, but the dynamic can be. And when we see things that way, then we remember that as long as our team is scoring a point, we're winning overall, even if we don't feel like we personally won the point.
Right. So when you walk away and you're like, haha, showed him or her, that's maybe something you might want to play back.
Yeah. Look, we all have moments that's gonna feel good, right?
Yeah.
But we're looking at the balance, right? We may have moments where it's hard not to like get escalated, get angry, say the unkind thing, but are we pouring in more good than bad? Right. Are we also like really important is like conflict is inevitable, but how are you repairing from it, right? Are you in a place where you can, after you cool down, after you think about it, like really acknowledge that you actually did understand what your partner said, even if you didn't agree with it.
Right.
And make an apology, a real, genuine apology when it's needed.
Yeah. What are the like most common unfair, dirty fight kind of things that you see?
That's a good question. You know, anytime you start using the words always or never, you know that you're veering into unfair territory. No, I'm sure my husband is like laughing as he listens to this because I'm so much wiser as soon as I'm out of the room than when I'm standing in front of him. But, you know, it is true. Like if you're trying to make a point and you're saying you always do this or you never do this, you're getting into this type of rigid black and white thinking to make a point that's probably just not true. It's really rare that someone literally always does X or literally never does Y, right? Mm-hmm. So those are things that are important. I think like even when you're in conflict, the healthiest couples manage to be really respectful of their partner, right? And that means like avoiding name calling, of course. Now, like what is name calling looks really different for different couples. There can be playful banter. Sometimes it's a really important part of your dynamic. But if you're in an escalated moment, then you probably want to really be sure that you are making an effort to show your partner that you don't see them as inferior to you just because they're disagreeing with you.
That's an interesting way to put it. Like the no name calling feels like, okay, that makes sense. But the like making sure that you're never I'm better than or you're less than, I think it's an interesting like mindset.
Yeah. So John Gottman is like the most prolific relationship researcher in a
Right.
lot of ways, right? And so he calls them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? Defensiveness, criticism, stonewalling, and contempt. And he shows that contempt is actually like the worst thing that can happen to a relationship. It's the hardest one to survive, right? There's antidotes to everything, but if you're coming in thinking that you are superior to your partner, it's going to affect every single interaction you have with them and every dynamic.
So much in the beginning of a relationship, like, oh, I'm so lucky to be with her, or like, he's too good for me, or whatever. Like, it seems like it's framed so early in a relationship, and it can be so easily just subtly reinforced throughout.
Yeah, when you said that sparked this for me, that like contempt doesn't just work when we're talking about like feeling like you're superior to your partner, but if you have a lot of inferiority to your partner yourself, it's also going to be a real drain on your relationship, even if they're coming in seeing you as an equal. But if you don't see yourself as an equal and you're constantly like, I don't know how I got here, he's so out of my league, she's way too good for me, it's going to introduce some really tough dynamics. So it's definitely one of the biggest ones to look out for and to work on, right? All of these things absolutely can be worked on, but we need the awareness.
I feel like that's okay. So transitioning a little into like parenting specifically, I wonder if this plays out more in like stay-at-home mom situations where it's like you had an identity and like you could kind of, hold your own. And then when you don't have that identity anymore, like all of that inferiority and like those feelings of just, this is all I do now.
Yeah.
I wonder if that comes up more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think parenting is like by design makes us want to reflect and want to do better, right? So it just feels like one of the most important things we do to raise a child. And I think like literally our current media like ecosphere thrives on increasing anxiety in order to then sell the solution.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. And stay-at-home moms are such a great example, right? Of being sold this narrative that like, oh, there's experts that you can consult about X, Y, and Z. And it's really problematic because like we should be in a place where we can trust ourselves and we should trust our instincts, right? Moms have been moms for centuries.
Yeah. And if you're staying at home, I feel like you have such an advantage of like really knowing what is going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet mom guilt is like just so prevalent, whether it's because you're staying at home and you feel like you've lost a bit of yourself and what are you showing your kids, or you are out there, driving your career and feeling like, what if my kids just need my presence? What if they need me at home? So the guilt is, I think, really hard. And unfortunately, again, our media ecosphere thrives on it. And yeah, I think, coming back to like the partnership, it does come up a lot where moms feel like things are more intuitive to them. We're seeing fathers are spending more time with their kids than ever before, right? And like from like the laughing memes to like really serious conflict, there's like this huge range of feeling like, why don't you know how to do this thing? And because you don't know how to do this thing, then I end up having to do it. And I keep feeling like, so overwhelmed and overburdened by it.
That makes so much sense with some of the conflict patterns. If that's what's emerging of like the inferiority, the guilt, the loss of identity. Let's say you had to like prioritize this, like especially for like a stay-at-home mom, like how would you tackle that kind of dynamic, especially if she was a working woman before, now she's stay at home. It feels like it would make any loss of identity that's like kind of normal after childbirth like so much more dramatic.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really good question, Kruti. And I'm like thinking about how many times like I've personally, as I've taken like a little bit of not a full step back, but definitely at least a half step back to be in mom
Yeah.
mode at this phase. Like the number of times my kid is having a meltdown, and I'm like, man, I am so much better at being a therapist than at being a mom. And as far as I can tell, like so many of my friends have had this exact thought, because sometimes our work is either more tangible, or like we feel like we like really read this textbook, attended this course, or like
Right.
really practiced it in a way that made us feel,
And you knew how to practice.
yeah. And we had these mentors, and we had supervision, and we had so many things that really made us feel like, yeah, we're really good at our jobs. And man, like there's no textbook that I think is really effective at understanding your kid, because they're really confusing at times. And it's part of like just how it's almost supposed to be, that you're going to ask yourself constantly, like, what am I supposed to do in this situation? How could I have done it better? What does he actually need? What does she actually need?
I think that's a really interesting one, because sometimes you just want to make it stop. And sometimes you're like, what do they actually need? And, like to make it stop, you might just give them some candy or let them do whatever the thing is that they're not supposed to do, right? But like the what did they actually need one, that's the harder one, right? That requires more time and thought and effort, and that intuition, which we haven't learned how to trust.
Yeah.
We've learned only how to look it up or click on the thing or consult an expert.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we potty trained my daughter recently, which is it was attempt 2 after first attempt was really tough. And you know what? It was like really nice in a lot of ways to be able to like get insight from other parents. Like I didn't realize that what my daughter really wanted was privacy. And once we gave her more of that, she was able to be more successful, right? And so I don't want to sound like I'm like really negating being able to tap into a community and tap into like other people's wisdom. But yeah, I think we have a really hard time trusting ourselves at this point, and trusting our instincts, which are again really good by design, right? And we really want to get to a place where we can, if we're gonna, not fall into so many of the traps that are isolating us and depressing us and increasing our anxiety.
Totally. All right. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about like some of like that depression, anxiety piece in particular, especially postpartum. Give us a little bit of an overview of what postpartum depression looks like.
Yeah, it's a lot of the symptoms that we see associated with depression are associated with postpartum depression, right? Which is changes in appetite, changes in how you're sleeping, changes in, your activity level, whether you're feeling really agitated or feeling really slowed down, or really finding that the things that you used to enjoy are no longer enjoyable, etc. Right? We have the literal diagnostic criteria, and then it's like, we really have to be able to unpack how much of this is like really impairing functioning versus how much of this is part and parcel of being a newborn mom.
Just being sleep deprived and your appetite's all over the place because you don't have time to eat anyway, or you're breastfeeding or whatever.
Exactly, right? Yeah, it's almost funny to be like increase or decrease in weight. Well, like obviously this is, going all over the place. And so many of these things, like sleep deprivation, we studied so much that it takes like such a massive toll on our bodies and our minds and our spirits. So of course, like the newborn phase, which is so tightly associated with sleep deprivation, takes a toll on us. So a lot of like what we experience is part of the experience, right? And And of course, postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and even like postpartum psychosis, right, are really real things that we want to keep an eye on by trying to like understand, like, okay, how much is this now stopping us from meeting our goals? Whether that is like taking care of our own needs, taking care of our baby's needs. That's a goal for a lot of moms, right? Or everything else that we want. Because, as much as we talk about how hard the newborn phase is, it's also like, I think every parent I've talked to has shared, like, I just found that I was so surprised by what I was capable of, right? Because you never imagined that you would be able to do as much as you do on 3 hours of sleep, because, that's part of what your body is trying to help you with, even as, it's not enough to make up for how hard it is. So yeah, I think we have to keep our eye out for, like, is this getting in the way of being able to bond with your baby, take care of yourself? And then we need some extra support in addition to the support that all moms of newborns deserve by default.
It's so interesting to think about, what's normal after postpartum versus like the clinical criteria just being like, well, who could really say, right?
Yeah.
So like if you're the dad and like, this is the person that you really know and you're keeping an eye on, and like, what are you looking for to kind of say, like, I think we should maybe go see someone?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think you're looking for, like, are they able to take in the support you're trying to offer or anyone else is trying to offer? Because a lot of times that feels really difficult for moms that are really struggling with postpartum disorders. And like being able to be attuned to kind of their relationship with baby and how that's feeling, because if they're feeling a lot of anger and a lot of stress, or like really like turned off by baby's cry, right? Those are all signs probably that more support is needed. And of course, like, so many of these things are, again, part of the experience. Probably every newborn mom has cried over something that wouldn't have made them cry before, or like really wants to do everything herself, or all of these things. But like, is there balance? Are you able to give them the support that they're able to take in to take care of themselves? Because if not, then probably there's better support to be offered by experts.
I'm thinking about how you said that we don't trust our intuition anymore, and how much that has to play into this.
Yeah.
Because if you're not trusting yourself and you're sleep deprived and you're looking things up to find like what the perfect solution is to this, then that seems like it will inevitably make you take a hit on your ability to accept support, because that isn't the perfect support of what you looked up and now what you think. So it's like this trajectory of don't trust yourself, sleep deprived, look it up, need it to be done exactly this way, can't get the support, and then like just rinse and repeat.
Yeah. That's like the perfect articulation of the cycle, right? And like, it's like exacerbated by the fact that like whenever you look something up with regards to parenting online, you're gonna get multiple super confident answers, right? And it's just gonna lead you to feel more confused in a lot of ways. And again, there's just so much commercialism tied to it, and this idea of like, oh, like it's about this product or about doing this thing. And that can really increase anxiety, right, too, because you're worried about like how you're supposed to understand which of these things you actually need, versus like being able to trust your instincts. And yeah, it, like you said, the hardest part about it is it makes it harder to ask for help from like the people in your life, right? The village that you want to build to actually parent your kiddo, because now the internet has led you to feel that you should be like embarrassed about this because you're already
totally. This is like my village hack, basically. Like, I have a couple of gifts that, like, these are just like my go-to things. Like, for little girls, I want to get them their first jewelry box. For new moms, I have like a couple of ingredients that I like help them stock up on. And so I have like these like go-to things to like help build the village. And I think it's helped a lot because, like, you know, they're nice gestures, but it's not like too much. And then you kind of escalate from there. But at this point, like, so the last time I got sick, one of my best friends in the neighborhood, she came over with like this, like, she's Japanese. So she made this Japanese curry, rice, like homemade pickles, like all this stuff. And I was like, how did we get to the point now that we're now like in these like insulated containers where we're like bringing each other these gourmet meals? And she's sick now. And I was like, how do you feel about shrimp tacos and tortilla soup? She's like, and now it's like fun. It's a fun thing we do. But I don't know. It was one of those things that almost felt like too big of a thing to even start. And now I'm so happy that like I have this village now, but it takes a lot.
Yeah, it takes a lot. And you know what? Everyone thinks like, oh, like a lot of people hearing this conversation may be like, oh, I'm going to do better about offering help the next time that I need it and build those connections. But we have to start the opposite way.
Yeah.
You know, we have to ask for help first and be like in that vulnerable place of asking for help, being fearful of being like seen as weak, seen as incompetent, or like just straight up rejected, right? But when we treat like ourselves the way we would treat a friend, we have the capacity, right, to see like it's okay to like want to ask a friend to make you soup when you're sick and to drop it off than to just feel like you're gonna get an impersonal.
I agree 100%. And a lot of times it's just saying yes, because people will offer, but our default answer is always no.
I'm good. Yeah,
it's okay. I'll figure it out. Like,
yeah.
That was one of my resolutions this year, is like just start saying yes to people.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so powerful to be able to say like just take the help, especially as moms who've almost been like socialized into feeling like you shouldn't need it. Yeah, I had like the great joy of like being able to help a friend out with some food too. And she's like, oh, can I like buy you a gift card for like a restaurant? You know, we're so grateful. And I was like, I like guarantee you I'm gonna need help in a couple of weeks. And like, if we can just keep it open, like that would mean everything to me.
I love that.
Yeah. And like clockwork, you know, a big snowstorm is hitting. I've left the kids' snow clothes at school because I wasn't like keeping tabs, and she was like, I have so many extras, I'm just gonna drop all this stuff off for you. And I was like, see, like that was so easy. And my husband was like, you know, just do a Target run, like it's fine, why are you asking for help? And I was like, because it just makes me feel closer to people. It's not about not being able to do it, but there's just something more fulfilling when you can like have these small chances to see that you can trust and be trusted, you know?
Yeah, just building the village, right? Okay, but then there are people that like are default your village where you're like, and you got to draw the boundaries, right? Around family, or, I mean, I don't know that this happens as much anymore, but like a neighbor who's always knocking on the door or whatever it might be. How do you draw a firmer boundary around the newborn without being like, oh, they had a baby and now they're like, you know, like it's so easy to become the vilified, like overly protective mother, or she doesn't know what she's doing. And like, we always blame the mom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you draw the boundaries without having that backlash?
That's such a good question. And I think I've like thought so much more about the reverse and about the boundaries based on like my own experience. But I think I think it comes down so often to like the first step has to be to interrogate like why we're feeling um overwhelmed by like whatever the person is, right? Because it's really going to inform it, right? Like, is it just like the frequency? Is it because like with this person in particular we're feeling really judged, or is it something else entirely, right? Because yeah, if it's just kind of like it feels like it's so often, then we can like probably get to a place of having an honest conversation, or like honestly for a lot of like minority cultures, like things have to be more subtle, right, to be fair. And so it's just gonna be like taking longer to answer the phone, or not responding, or just like, you know, hinting at being busy, rather than like having to give the 3 invitations to for someone to feel comfortable. um but once we like unpack like what we need, then we can ask for it more clearly, even if what we're asking for is do less.
Right. It's hard because, you know, a lot of the kind of common advice is like a boundary isn't what they do, it's what you do, right? So if they keep calling, you don't answer. If they keep knocking, you say, sorry, come back another time. I find a lot of that to not be subtle enough to like preserve the relationship. And I mean, I don't have a perfect answer for this, but I think too much in like modern society, we are so quick to the boundary that you lose, like you're compromising the relationship. You're making the relationship stretch to a point of near breaking that is like harder to come back from.
Yeah.
With like these super firm, like.
Yeah. I've spent so much time thinking about this because I sometimes like really get worried that like the mental health field in general is like really overemphasizing like boundaries as part of our self-care, rather than like some of the adjustments that we need to do as part of our self-care. um you know, especially when we are talking about people who are coming from other cultures that tend to be more collectivist by design, right? Because I just found that so many times like the boundary is because we're told that like we shouldn't need someone and we shouldn't feel
well, you're literally
dependent on them.
Boxing yourself in. You're literally like cutting people out.
Yeah. Like I've had conversations with clients about like accepting things from parents, right? And like other like friends outside of the culture would be like, oh, you know, don't set yourself up for them to feel like entitled to your time or your, you know, attention. And it's like, but they already are. Like, we're connected, right? Like, we take their help. We know we're going to be there for them later in life when they need us. And it's not that that's always easy. It's not that that doesn't bring up frustration, but we all tend to be stronger for it, right? And like, you know, sometimes I think a lot about how Indian culture in particular, right, and aunties, right, are just known for how blunt they are about the things that they say to us. And like, I really appreciate that we should push them to be more conscious and not say a lot of these mean things. But sometimes I'm also like, I think we're all stronger for like hearing things that we had to learn to like let go through one ear and out the other.
Right.
And allow our own self-confidence to mean that it was so strong that other people's words didn't impact us. And that's a lot of the work, right?
One of my big lessons with aunties was what they're saying to me is way more about them than it is about me. Like, this is way more their anxiety about their own kid not being married than it is about, they don't care if I'm married or not. This is way more about their own, like, lack of hobbies. Like, this is their hobby. And like, I'm such a low stakes person to them. Do they even care if they offend me? No. You know, like this is way more about them than it is about any of the content of their question.
And sitting here as like such a like phenomenally confident and amazing woman, like maybe we can give them a little credit too for like you being able to like see that you didn't need to let their words impact you. Because the flip is also true, right? How many aunties like come and be like, oh, what's going on with your acne? I know what you can do. Not because they're trying to make you feel self-conscious, because they genuinely think that they're gonna be able to help you, or are genuinely like invested in you, even though it feels like they don't even know us to be invested in us because of the fabric of this culture.
Aunties, like everything is the end of the world, right? Like, yeah. Okay. Well, that's a whole other thing. Can we talk a little bit about being eldest daughter?
Absolutely.
Have you seen any of like the eldest daughter memes?
So many.
Yeah. What do you think about all of that?
I think I always laugh, and then Instagram just sends me more because it knows that I love this content, and so many times I feel really like just seen, right? I really think I am a psychologist today because I was an eldest daughter, right? And I did a lot of mediating for my parents, like so many eldest daughters do, especially when we're eldest daughter, child of two immigrants. It's
well, our parents had zero conflict resolution skills or communication skills, right? Like, yeah.
Well, no,
that generation just.
Well, yeah, they came from a system that, like, for the most part worked, which was you're part of a joint family. You will use these subtle means. You will have these buffers, and conflict will be resolved, but it won't be through a direct conversation, right?
Will it be resolved? Or will it just be like simmered down low enough to where we can like pretend to forget about it for a little while? That
too, right?
Okay.
Both. I think sometimes genuine conflict is like addressed through less direct means, right? Or like an elder person in the family.
Were you a fighting household, or were you like a passive aggressive household, or like a different?
Both. At different
times.
Fun. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Probably more on the passive aggressive side, but you know.
See, like, we were yellers.
Gotcha.
I don't know how to be passive aggressive.
It's an art, Kruti, to like know exactly what's gonna push what buttons, but yeah. I mean, I like have so much empathy for parents going from a context that made sense to a new context where like there's no buffers. Your partner is everything as you like are surviving in this new country, right? And so they needed their eldest daughters who have a little bit more skill at some of the things than they've ever experienced, and it's a lot. That's a lot to, you know, have a 7-year-old here, like, go tell your dad this, or like pick up that, you know, this isn't happening, or try or feel this like pressure to like protect younger siblings or other things, right? And yeah, I started out in education, right? Because I really wanted to do something impactful, and it felt like teaching was such a pivotal thing in a kid's life, but I wasn't great at it, right, to be honest, and that led to a pivot. But I also realized that like I was always really, really passionate about like couples work, because that is like so much of what impacts a whole family.
Totally.
Too. And so finding my path there it's been amazing, and definitely started the moment I was born an eldest daughter.
It's funny because I don't think I tried to mediate. I would just be like, I'm leaving now. This is nice. It was a yelling household. So it was like, okay, I can't deal with this. This is too much. You guys need to stop. I'm going. But it's interesting because I married into if you don't talk about the problem, it doesn't exist house. And we would always fight it out, and then like 10 minutes later we'd be fine, but like, you know, those fights got pretty spicy. And it's just so weird to like be bonded to another person who fights completely different.
That's crazy because I married into a more, they're not as fighty, but they are like very communicative. And it was very, very interesting for me coming from a more passive aggressive place. Yeah. So I'm just like connecting to this idea of like, yeah, being bonded to someone who like just approaches things so differently.
Right.
Yeah.
That's okay. So what are like have you, in your couples work, are you seeing a lot of different fighting styles like influence the relationship dynamic?
Absolutely. So when we talk about couples therapy, right, we have to talk about Sue Johnson and coming up with this idea of how like our own attachment impacts like our dynamic with our partners, right? And like 65% of couples, or what, I'm pretty sure that's the right number, fall into the exact same dynamic, which is one person pursues and one person withdraws. And by pursue, I mean that they go to their partner trying to pull what they need to fill. Like,
why aren't you talking to me? Like, like they're kind of chasing that person.
Yeah. And like, but like, it may not be, why aren't you talking to me? Even though that is the need, it'll be like, you haven't done the dishes. You just walked into the house. Like, you haven't done X, Y, Z, right? Do they like really, really care about the dishes? Sometimes. But a lot of times it's like, if I say I want you to talk to me, I'll feel really vulnerable because I'm admitting that I like you, right? And I want you. And I feel a little unsure about how you're going to respond to that. So I'll focus on this like tangible thing, right? The dishes, whatnot. And so I pursue. And then there's the other partner generally withdraws in reaction to that pursuit, right? They say, they shut down, they pull away, they ignore the dishes and decide they're going to go watch TV for 30 minutes to try to deal with like the feelings that they're not showing their partner but do exist, right? And like a lot of times a pursuer is coming from a base of feeling insecure in their attachment, and a lot of times the withdrawer is in some way feeling incompetent, right? And that drives them feeling like, even though I care so much about this person, I'm gonna pull away because I've convinced myself that's what protects them. Because if I'm not doing anything, I can't do it wrong.
Ah, that's interesting. And it's making me think about that newborn stage again.
Yeah.
Where everything has to be done, like you didn't do the diaper cream and you didn't do this, and like the milk needs to be at this many degrees or this many ounces. And those small criticisms and those small nitpicks really add up.
Yeah, especially when you have a dad who's already seeing, because yes, a lot of the pursue withdraw dynamic, we do see that withdrawers tend to be men and pursuers tend to be women. Not always, but it is there's a lot rooted in how we're wired to that, right?
Just like the division of labor, I guess.
Yeah. And so when a mom is like, you didn't do this exactly the right way, and is coming in from that place of like really wanting things to be perfect, and then this dad is like, well, first, I already know that like you've done so much for this baby. You know, created it, and you are postpartum and you're more connected, and like your experience of bonding with this child is completely different from mine, right? I'm speaking as a dad. And then you tell me that like I don't know how to do the bottle right. I just feel so distant from this whole thing, right? Like I don't even know how I fit now into this like dyad that mom and baby have. And so of course it can really exacerbate that dynamic a lot of times, because, you know, dad in his head has convinced himself that mom is a perfect mom and like wants everything to be perfect, but is also doing everything perfect. And like mom over there is actually like, this has drained everything of me. And I just want my support system. I want this person who chose me, and loved me because before I had this baby, because they knew how smart I am, how sexy I am, how funny I am, how ambitious I am, right? And they're really like a lot of times looking for their partner, but it's coming out as, can you do this bottle and can you make sure you get it perfect? And so it's just rife with this opportunity to misunderstand each other, right? And to unfortunately stoke our insecurity or stoke our fear of inadequacy.
Yeah, that's really hitting hard because I'm thinking about almost every person in my life that has gone through that rough newborn stage where, these are all fantastic men. Like, these are all people you would call in a crisis, but they're getting shut out during what seems like really trivial things like diaper changing or burping or bottles or whatever. It's like, this person could save my life. Like, this is somebody that you would call in a crisis, and like, we're ripping them apart for bottles. So if you're in that place, what do you recommend couples do?
I think a lot of moms need to hear that their babies are really, really resilient.
Yeah.
Right? We talk about how fragile babies are, and they're fragile too, but they're also really, really resilient. And as much as they're like literally damaging your eardrums, crying for that bottle, like, they're okay if it's a couple of degrees off. They're okay if it's not the right brand. And they're gonna be okay if it takes you a couple of extra minutes to get it right. As hard as those couple of extra minutes get, right? And this ties back to what we were talking about earlier with like trusting ourselves, but also like trusting our partners, right? That like good intentions and wanting to get it right and trusting ourselves really matter when it comes for caring for our kids. And we don't have to be attached to the idea that someone else knows how to do it better than us, because we're babies' parents. Like, we're wired to know, we're wired to understand if we can get to a place of like taking in the amount of help we need to trust ourselves, right? So like, I think that's the first thing, is like take some of the pressure off of the expectations of how things are going to be done. And then like, look, this is really, really hard for a lot of couples, and it often like takes a lot of time, and that's okay. Sometimes a lot of like this is like just being okay with like this being a season that you're not going to be as connected to your spouse, or you're not going to feel like best friends because you're just like, two soldiers in the trenches together, right? But like, when you can, to get back to that place of like learning about them, right? Building your love maps, as Gottman likes to talk about it. Like, even if it is like, what's your favorite nursery rhyme now? Like, I'm really sick of Baby Shark. Do you have any ideas of what we could, play instead? Or, just, what's your favorite snack, or etc.
One time at Halloween, there was a family of sharks. And everywhere they just played the song like constantly, but they were like in the same circuit. And we just heard the song
quite a night, it sounds like.
All night. And I was super cranky that night. I remember just rubbing into Alok, and I was just like, he was like, it's the song. The auditory like input from like the crying and the like baby stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a lot. It can be very like overstimulating.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's almost meant to be overstimulating, right? It's literally changing our brain by design, but
it's their little siren.
Yeah. So, yeah. I think sometimes you just need to give yourself some space, take the help, go out for dinner with your husband without feeling guilty about your kid, because, whether it's grandma or babysitter, they're not going to do it exactly right, but your kid is resilient, right? I mean, like, care a little bit. I'm not saying, like, don't try to set up these people for success or try to help them understand what your baby prefers And, I will personally just acknowledge that, like, my mom was like, there's no way your baby cares what bottle brand, like, they have. Like, it's milk. Like, don't they just drink it? I'm like, try. Because, one liked the Komotomo and one liked the Aventi, and I don't know why, but it was easier to go into that, right? But, like, you figure that out, and then you give them a lot of grace, and when you have the capacity to nourish your relationship with your partner, you're nourishing your whole family, right?
I love that. Okay, so for that newborn stage, if you're in this like vicious pursue withdraw cycle, you're saying based on your years of expertise working with couples that the best strategies are to find time to nourish the relationship.
Yeah. And like, be more direct about what you're feeling.
Be direct about what you're feeling.
Yeah. So if it's like, if you know that you keep talking about the bottles, but all you want is a hug, like, try to say, like, I just really need a hug. So yeah, be honest. Do the work to understand what you need to communicate before you communicate it. And know that, like, appreciation is like the biggest thing you can do for your relationship. And it may come off forced at the beginning, but it still is like such a great practice to be able to keep trying and keep understanding that, like, you have to be able to give your partner appreciation, recognition, show them that you see them.
Okay, I love that. Thank you. All right. So we talked a little bit about the sleep deprivation. Is that just like the fact of life, or is there anything we can do about it?
I think it's like a fact of life that newborns are not going to sleep well. And they're going to sleep, and they're going to make it hard for us to sleep. I think it's important to remember that, like, we can withstand a lot more of it than we think we can, and these phases are short. Like, if you get to the point where your 6-month-old still isn't sleeping, then you probably want to check in with your doctor and figure out how you can get the support to get in a better place. I'm a big fan of sleep training, which we did pretty late with our first kid because it felt really mean, but with our second, we did it as soon as we could, and they're both like such great sleepers, and they're happier, even as hard as it was. So yeah, it's hard and it's temporary. It has to be temporary, or you need to figure out why it's not temporary, because that's how it's supposed to be. Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about fatherhood.
Yeah.
So as a father, you'll often feel pushed away, or like, my only job here is to make sure mom has everything that she needs, or my only job here is bath time, or like, whatever limited scope there is. What can each person do? What can the father do to address this? What can the mom do to address this? Like, what's a healthy conversation around this look like?
Yeah, I think for moms, being able to, like, see that now their best friend, their partner, their everything is experiencing the same thing they are, but differently, is really important. The acceptance piece of it, right? And being able to, like, know that no, they don't know what it feels like to have the sore nipples, or just the anxiety, the depression, the, like, roller coaster of emotions, but they're there with you, and they care so deeply about this child, even though it looks really different, and being okay with the fact that, like, it's lonely, but it's not lonely at the same time. And trying to give themselves grace to include dad however they can, and help him be a part of this amazing transformative change they're experiencing, right? Yeah. And John Gottman, again, has really, really interesting research on this, but he's like, the dads that thrive, and therefore the couples that thrive in this moment are the ones that are able to lean into feeling awe, right? And of like watching their partner and saying like, this is incredible, you're transforming, it's beautiful for all of us. I know that I can't like fully comprehend it because I can't fully experience it, but this is lovely, and I like am here to support my awe rather than feeling pushed away by it or jealous of it or resentful of it. And we can actually choose actively to lean into a feeling by choosing to do so, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of how I would react if, like, in those, like, really stressful moments, if Alec were to be like, this is lovely, we're changing, we're growing, I'd probably, like,
yeah.
I don't know.
You want to find more genuine ways of being like, this is lovely. And maybe it's more sounds like, you're amazing. Like, you're doing this and it sucks, right? And I want you to know that I see how incredible you are.
What you said earlier about how we find just kind of this like expanded capacity to just like get stuff done and survive, like just what feels like never ending random, we call it constant minor attack, where it's just relentless small stuff attacking you. Like, but I don't know, there was like an internal, like we have our own vocabulary around it. We have like our own, and what you were saying about like the same side, right? Like we are under constant minor attack.
Yeah, exactly. To feel like the partnership, to, you know, you don't just have to feel in awe of your partner, but of yourself, because like, man, like when you were in grad school or high school or like at that one job, like you never thought you'd be able to function with the sleep deprivation you are now, or like just the food deprivation or the water deprivation, but you are, and it's amazing. So remember, you're on a team, and like lean into your strength, and lean into knowing that like this is everything in childhood is fleeting, right? Because I saw like actually a really nice post on Instagram the other day where it was like, you know, the mom brain that like puts the keys in the freezer, which I've literally done, or like whatever other thing it is because like your brain is working so hard to remember every little thing about your kid. And like, it's not because it's less capable, it's just reprioritizing. And that's like really beautiful in a lot of ways. So when you're under minor attack, like you're stronger for it, and so are they.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to ask you a little bit about dad depression. Do you see a lot of depressed dads in these kind of couple conflict situations?
I will say I personally don't see as many, but I'm not entirely, I don't think that's because it's not really out there, but maybe I'm not feeling like the most reassuring therapist for the dads that are dealing with feeling, you know, disconnected from the baby because the physical experience is so different, or maybe even like just grieving the relationship they had with their partner that feels really, really different now, or even just like their own loss in identity. I have talked to a couple of dads about how like it's just so hard to feel like nothing is a guarantee, right? Like you think you're going to work tomorrow, but you don't know what's going to happen in the middle of the night, or like you think you're going to hang out with your friend, but like something is gonna like get in the way, and you just don't have like that freedom to say like, I'm gonna do this when I want it, or I'm gonna do this when I need it. And I think that applies to women too, of course, in a lot of ways, but because perhaps this generation of dads is doing so much more than their own dads did, it's tough. And I also think like one of the biggest dynamics there is like, this is a generation of dads that's doing so much more than their dads did or anyone did before them. And they still have partners who are like, you don't get it. And we are still not 50-50. And it's true. And like both are true. The things aren't equal and they're doing the best they can, right?
Yeah.
But it's inherently kind of a tough system.
There was a Surgeon General report about parental burnout because like we're also working more.
Yeah.
So they're spending more time with their kids, more time at work. So what goes? Their social life, their self-care.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, so much of that comes back to like parenting feels, I think, more stressful for our generation a lot of times than it did for previous generations because we have social media like really wearing on us and the higher expectations of what we're gonna do. And I don't know, sometimes it just like, I think Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Coddling of the American Mind and the Anxious Generation, puts it really well, where it can feel like we've like lost some of the joy because of all of this confluence of factors. And so, you know, working more, spending more time with our kids, but less time like giving ourselves what we need, and all of this feels less joyful across the board. Like, of course we're struggling.
Yeah. Tough. Sure. It also seems like, of course we're struggling. Of course we're more lonely, right? Because we're just like, that's the thing that goes. And then I think it's also because modern parenting today looks so different than it did like 20, 30 years ago. We don't want to ask our parents. Like, we just think our parents' stuff is just like, oh, that doesn't work anymore. Nobody does that anymore. I think my mom was telling me something that was just like, what? She like wanted to put like butter on my kids' lips or something. I was like, what are we talking about? Like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know what there is to do about that. But like, you know, we don't ask. I don't ask the parents anymore. They're both of my kids' grandmothers are pediatricians. It's like wild. And I'm still just like, I don't know if you know what you're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot has changed, right? And
they're
like,
not wrong. They're just weird. It
See,
just
that's
seems so
interesting.
foreign.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to try to unpack like what exactly is coming up for us, right? Like, do we feel like if our parent is like, oh, this ceremony means you give honey to a 3-month-old, like that's objectively like, let's not do that, right? Like, that's just like, yes, it's tradition, but there's so many reasons not to take that risk. But like some of the other things, like, yeah, my kids' daddy loves to put tail in their hair at night and before they go to sleep. And we do not take baths in the morning. And I have so many feelings about them going to school with oily hair because I know like how it felt with friends, right? But they're 2 and 4. And honestly, like they could use some help. They do not have my hair genes. They have my husband's hair genes. And I'm very sad for them, right? But like remembering that like what is being offered is not meant to like lead them to be bullied or like anything negative, but it's given with so much care has helped me be okay with that one, right? And of course there's like 10 things that they want to do that like that just,
but I find if you do say yes to some things, like when you say no, it means more, as opposed to like just disregarding like their method or their ideology completely, like just no, you know, everything is a no.
Yeah.
Then it's like a constant fight. But if you're just like, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. We're not going to do that. That I don't like that, but I'll do this. Then like you can, I don't know. You can keep the relationship, keep the help, build the village,
right?
But not do the crazy shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think knowing that it's always going to be a tug of war and like you're always going to be surprised by which one like hurts their feelings because you don't realize that it's because their daddy did it to them or X, Y, Z, the other thing is important.
So there's this idea of, I think Alok was telling me, I think he was trying to make me feel better. It was like, they don't need a perfect parent.
Good enough.
Yeah, the good enough thing. And he reframed it to where I did feel better at the time. I was like, what are you trying to say right now? But do you want to expand on the perfect parent versus good enough?
Yeah. I think it's this idea that we've been talking about today about taking the stress off of ourselves, because it is not about being perfect. That's not what our kids need. They don't need to be protected from even our challenges, actually. It's okay for them to see us kind of struggle and figure it out and give ourselves grace. Like, to be able to model that for our kids is so huge, especially for our daughters, right? And so good enough is about, like, to me, it's really this idea that, like, the rupture is inevitable. And by rupture, I mean, like, just getting it wrong, being misattuned, yelling, okay, right? Or just, like, not being unruffled in a moment with your kid that you want to be. But the repair is everything. And even the repair, you're not going to get it right every time. But if, like, more times than not, you catch yourself and you're like, wow, I lost it. I did. I would like to prevent this before I lose it, but in this moment, all I can do is, like, say, hey, that wasn't cool. What you did wasn't cool either. Let's, like, find a new way. Because when we give ourselves permission to, like, really just, like, be human and be unencumbered by unrealistic standards, we thrive, and our kids do too. And so good enough is this idea that, like, parenting is not a report card where, like, oh, if you just get, like, a passing grade, then you're actually failing. Like, it's like, if you're, like, really in there and you're trying, it actually is everything. You can't measure it the same way.
Yeah. I really like the idea of, like, instead of being the perfect parent, to be, like, the perfect partnership in parenting. And it does take a lot of the stress off of, like, just the, oh, they didn't have a vegetable at dinner, or, like, they don't have, like, the perfect water bottle or whatever, like, these stupid things that, like, we obsess over.
Yeah.
And it really emphasizes that, like, a perfect partnership is joyous and fun, and, like, you have that internal language, all right? Like, the things that we'll say to each other, like, our kids don't even understand. They don't know what we're talking about because it's that inside language. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it's been fun to refocus that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like, I'm going to push back on the word perfect in any context. Sure. Because I'm just going to guess that you do get mad at Alok from time to time, and he doesn't get you from time to time. No, you guys are actually perfect. For everyone else listening, that's not Alok and Kruti. No, I'm just kidding.
I cannot remember the last time I got mad at him.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is weird.
That's awesome.
I remember the last time he got mad at me. It was 2.5 years ago.
Wow. So maybe, but, like, more minor.
No, it was a big one.
That was a big one.
Yeah, that was a big one. And then, I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird. Y'all are weird. No one think that life has to look like that.
No, it doesn't. No, please don't. Please don't. It's taken a lot of work. We've been together since I was 18. I'm turning 40 this year. We've been together forever.
That's amazing. Yeah. It is so amazing to have, like, a friendship blossom into this partnership.
Right.
And this parenting thing. And, you know, a lot of us sometimes still misunderstand our partner, or, like, feel, like, misattuned, and things happen. But, like, if you can remember that, like, the repair is everything and not just getting it right the first time, I think it really helps us lean into our kindness and our gratitude and our appreciation for our partner in really lovely ways.
Sleep helps a lot.
Sleep is so good.
Yeah.
Sleep is good. Water is amazing.
Those first 2 months after newborn, I'm just like, it's just going to be a shit show.
Yeah.
Just make it to month 2, and then you'll get to some sleep. And like, it'll get easier from there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, baby is fed, baby gets some diaper changes. You're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of my other biggest piece of advice is like for your entertainment, just like please watch shows and like not scroll.
Yeah.
Like if you're breastfeeding or whatever, or you're up all night, just like find a show you like instead of like being on your phone all the time.
It's really bad for us in so many ways.
Yeah.
Not only are we getting guilty in content, but it's also like changing our brain chemistry.
It's not
with
fun.
Those microdoses. It's not fun.
It's not fun.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything that you feel like you want to share? Like any advice for the like newborn stage of life?
I feel like it like comes off wrong, but I'll say it anyways.
Sure.
Right? Like take it less seriously. They're resilient, you're resilient. So trust yourself and you're gonna get through it. Yeah. And and every parent who's like, it doesn't get better, it just gets harder is lying to you. It does get better. I promise it gets better.
It gets so much easier.
There's challenges with every stage.
I agree.
But yeah, it does. It gets easier. Trust yourself. And
I think dealing with like a defiant 7-year-old is you are so much more able to deal with those as a parent than you are with like a newborn,
a colicky baby that you just don't. Sometimes there's nothing you can do.
Right.
That's really hard.
And in our case, we discovered colic. Like the one time I was like, okay, look, I think you can go back to work. It's fine. You can take the overnight calls. We're okay now. Yeah. And I was like, what do you mean she has colic now? Like his first night, like overnight.
Yeah.
Disaster.
It's rough.
Yeah. When do you break up?
It's a good question. Look, if we're looking for like the most clear-cut answer, then it's like if you're being abused, right? Mm-hmm. Physically, emotionally, financially, like break up. Take care of yourself. Protect yourself, right? For everyone else, it's a lot harder to define, but I think you have to really see if your relationship is helping you meet your goals for yourself and for your relationship. And so if you're with someone where like it's fine, but you realize that you're not enjoying things and you're not growing, and like all of these dreams you had for work just kind of feel stuck. I mean, don't jump straight to breaking up, but unpack that, right? And understand like what is going on. And if it's, that the conflict is out loud and real and visceral, and it is making it hard for you to have the time to go to the gym, to see your friends, to do your woodworking, then you really have to ask yourself if this relationship is working for you, right? I think when we look, relationships require so much sacrifice, and they're so good for us because they push us to like get out of our own heads and think about someone else. But I think when you are thinking about breaking up, you're doing a deep assessment of like how this relationship is impacting you to decide.
I think that's really helpful. Okay, so let's say you did break up and now you're co-parenting. Help us understand how to navigate healthy boundaries, or I don't know if boundaries is like right where we go. Like, what does a successful co-parenting relationship look like?
Okay, so I think a successful co-parenting relationship, the individual part of the work is like addressing our insecurities and our senses of inadequacy, right? Because if those are getting in the way of like being able to have a conversation about the logistics of things, we need to figure that out. So if there's a lot of resentment at our partner, or like every time they're like, I'm running 15 minutes late, you're feeling like really concerned that it's because they're with someone else, you've got to be able to figure out how you're gonna like heal and deal with that to be the best co-parent you want to. Because the best co-parenting relationships are still built on trusting each other, right? And communicating with each other, knowing that like what you guys have agreed to is going to happen, and it's going to happen the way that you discussed. There's probably still going to be like a lot of differences in opinion, but that's where like trust and communication comes in with like, okay, like if we disagree on this, it's not because you're like literally wrong and an inferior human being, but because we're like, we have different styles, and it's okay for our kids to be able to like experience both in some ways. I think it would be a lot to just expect to be like completely aligned on everything, but to get to a place where you know that you're like communicating about everything and like the big stuff is consistent enough is really important.
Definitely. One of my favorite ways to disagree and like work through it is we ask each other scale 1 to 10, how strongly do you feel about this? And just whoever feels strongly about it wins.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I see your 8. And it's like, no, I don't feel that strongly about it. We'll do it your way.
Yeah. And then to have the humility, right? If your partner says 8 and you're going second, not to say 10 just to win, but to be honest, right?
Right. That's the fighting fair part, right? Like, don't just go to 10 for the sake of it.
Right.
And we don't like undercut like, oh, you're so crazy for thinking that this is an 8 or whatever. It's just like, okay.
Yeah.
That's how you feel.
Yeah.
But I really, it saved us a lot of conflict to just be like, oh, this isn't a fight. This is a disagreement.
Yeah.
But I can see that being successful in a co-parenting relationship too, where it's just like, because you don't have to get all up in your feelings for that, right? It's just scale 1 to 10. Where are we at? Like,
exactly. Yeah, that's a great, like concrete way to do things, to like live out this philosophy of like take it less seriously. Like each of these decisions can't be like the biggest thing, and they can't be like part of your power struggle to like push your partner away or pull them in.
Right.
And if that's what's happening, then you've got to like, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your kids, you owe it to your partner to figure that out.
Yeah. I also like the amount of energy it saves, because you don't have to like list off your 20 reasons. It's just like,
you want it?
Yeah.
You got it. Yeah.
I keep like getting your hopes up that we're done, but we didn't do any of the Reddit posts.
Let's do it.
Okay. Sounds good. Wife doesn't love me after our baby. My wife had our baby 6 months ago. Around the 3rd month, she expressed how she felt disconnected to me physically and emotionally. She said that she doesn't know if it's her postpartum anxiety or her real feelings. Ever since then, she's been really resentful towards me, won't let me touch her, and barely says I love you anymore. I get rejected every time. She seems very normal when she's around her work and friends, though, so it has me questioning the whole postpartum thing. I don't know what to think. It's just mentally straining me. I feel like I'm becoming depressed due to this situation. I'm holding on to this relationship for the baby. Please, anything helps at this point. Is this really a postpartum thing? Will the love come back if her hormones level out? Sorry to vent. I'm just hurting. I don't want to lose my family.
And that is so hard to hear. It can be like the experience of postpartum can be just so confusing, not just for the person experiencing it, but for their partner too. But this is how it can look, and it is important to like have some acceptance of like how hard it can be, and have some space to grieve what it's taking from you in this moment, while knowing that like yes, the love can absolutely come back. It will take work, it will take time, it will take being able to like have the capacity for that work and time. I think a lot of times, like, our spouse is just a much safer space than work and friends. And so it may just be like all manifesting on this poor dad in a way that feels really unfair and big. And it's not because she cares least about him, but it might actually be because she cares most about him and is really safe with him, that she's shutting down kind of parts of herself.
Feels safe with him, and then also therefore he gets like the worst of her, right? Like the part that she can't show everyone else.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, one more. I love him, but I miss her. My baby is currently 5 weeks old today, and he has been the best thing that happened to us. I love him, and I will always choose him no matter what. But every night when my husband is asleep, baby is asleep, and I'm all alone, I can't help but miss the person that I was. I feel so guilty for being sad about it, and I can't talk to anyone about it because I don't want them to think that I don't love my baby. Sorry, I miss being able to do anything on my own pace at my own time. I miss my body. I miss going out. I miss working on my business. I miss doing a lot of things, but I don't want to change anything. I love my baby, and I have a wonderful husband. I'm exclusively breastfeeding, and I never thought it would consume almost my entire day. Makes me sad thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. We lose so much of ourselves, right? And sometimes we literally like have to just sit in the grief for a moment to let it pass, right? The way that kind of waves crash on us. And then recede, and so much is gone and so much is lost, and I hope this mom can like acknowledge that all of that is true, and let go of any guilt for feeling that way, because it's so okay that you are so in love and so sad at the same time.
Right.
And yeah, my favorite way to kind of deal with guilt and let go of it is to try to pull for the gratitude under it, right? And so if we're, like, you're feeling guilty about buying a coffee because your parents have, paid for your college, instead of just like drinking the coffee and hating it and then like being kind of frustrated that you're not in position to do better, you express your gratitude to your parents, like, hey, thanks for putting me in this position, right? And so in this situation, the guilt of everything is like maybe gratitude of like, I'm so grateful that I had something that was so hard to give up, right? And I'm so grateful to have this set of experiences and to have this baby. And I'm just gonna, thank my friends, thank myself, thank my family for putting me in a place of being able to experience that, instead of just feeling guilty about losing some of it or being attached to losing some of it, because hey, I think that makes total sense.
Yeah, totally. Okay, this is just like a last bonus question. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the headline is, don't go to marriage counseling, go to individual therapy. What do you think about that?
Look, if you can do it, do both. I think that if you're in a place where you're having a tough time really communicating with your partner or repairing from a big rupture with your partner, then having an individual space to think about how you're feeling, how you're representing things, how you're processing things, with a space where you and your partner are seen and heard by a third party who can help hold the safety and give the skills for you guys to communicate better, is just the very best thing that can happen. There's so much space for individual therapy alone to be effective too, depending on what we're experiencing, but there's also a lot of space for couples therapy in a vacuum to be really effective. And what I think I love about being able to do both modalities is sometimes it is couples work that helps two individual people see what they need to do for themselves and what their growth journey is going to look like. And yeah, sometimes individual therapy is also an opportunity to say, like, the way you're thinking about these things, the way you're approaching your partner is coming from this insecurity that we can work on so that you can be a better partner too.
Thank you so much. I feel like this has been so helpful. It's been fun to kind of like relive in a safe way all the newborn stuff, but also to kind of like talk through. I think a lot of it's so easy to give advice, right? But it's harder to give like actual concrete strategies and know the lines and the kind of frameworks. So I really appreciate you sharing all that with us.
Yeah, no, this made me think deeper. I'm gonna go back and be a better parent too. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. What does being a better parent mean to you?
Being present.
Yeah.
A lot of times. I think sometimes that still feels like a struggle. It's like there won't even be a phone in my hand, but I'm in my head and now I'm not present, right? Yeah, and when I'm present, I'm able to like take things less seriously because it's easier to say than it is to do sometimes.
Totally.
But to give in where it's okay to give in and not feel like now my kid is going to expect this every single time we do this. No, it's okay.